So far, there's only one other meeting scheduled. It was for the 22nd of March. We've asked that there be many more meetings and that we develop with the ministry a comprehensive work plan to review the legislation in detail and that it not be kind of held against any ticking legislative time clock.
Sorry, so you said here you had 2 meetings before Bill 85?
No, we had...
You have 2 coming up, is that?
We had one in February the 11th, okay. And there was another one scheduled for March 22nd after the ledge opens for the spring session. We've asked that that be moved up to occur before the ledge convenes, but also that there be many more. That where's the hurry is our message.
Can these concerns be addressed in the regulations which would come down the road, or do they have to specifically be addressed before the legislation passes?
I think the legislation will inform the regulations, or at least it should. But too often we find that what you see in legislation is later on amended or watered down by regulations. I think the two should go hand in glove. You should lay out, here's the legislation, then if the, and that, if you will, might be the platform, here's how we're going to make it work, that is the regulations. And I think those two should work in tandem, not one separated from the other. The minister's indicated that his timeline for regulations would be sometime in September of this year. We're saying, well, okay, then why not take the same time for the legislation? Let's do it all at once. We have existing regulations. Do they work? Are they old and antiquated? I read some yesterday, and damned if I could figure out exactly what they were saying. And for that reason, we need some clarity, and the two should work together.
Has Minister Morgan given an indication of why such urgency is attached to this bill?
No, the minister hasn't spoken directly to kind of the timetable, other than they intend to bring it back in the spring session, and one would assume from that then it will. The intention is by the government to make it law. But in terms of why or what it's intended to address or what the significance of the deadline is, no, we don't have the benefit of that thinking.
Given the increased costs that could, as you explained, possibly be passed on to employers, what is the response from the representatives on the consultative committee?
I think it's fair to say that most employers have looked at it and said, well, okay. In fact, some of them probably look at it with some relish and think, well, we got what we wanted. But the real question is, have they got what they wanted? Do they want duplication, fragmentation, and increased cost? If you're running a business, it costs a certain amount of money to engage in collective bargaining at one table. And you always run the risk at that one table of a dispute. Now multiply that. There's going to be more cost, more potential for disruption, more discord and disharmony.
How many people are on the committee?
There are 9 labor representatives, 9 employer representatives, and 1 community representative.
And have you told the minister yet that you guys would like them to sort of slow down this and reconsider?
Yes, we did. We did on February the 11th. We made it abundantly clear that we have a lot of concerns, and we did propose the extended timeline. In fact, the president of the Federation of Labor, on behalf of the labor representatives on the minister's committee, wrote to the minister on February the 6th, proposing what we've just been discussing, that let's continue the dialogue, let's slow it down, let's examine it and develop a work plan to go through it piece by piece.
And have you had a response yet?
We've not had an official response from the minister, other than if there are amendments to be made, he has indicated that he would prefer them to be made before the bill hits the floor of the legislature again. In which case we say, well then fine, wait for the fall session or next year's session.
Is there an easy way to explain the concept or the fear that you have that some workers who currently would be eligible for potential union membership would be denied that. It sounds like you're saying that they would be converted into contract workers and thus shielded from...
Or be regarded as management.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. You've all heard of the grain company called Viterra. Used to be the wheat pool. And it was taken over recently by a big transnational corporation called Glencore. As part of the takeover process, Glencore is selling parts of the old Viterra operation to James Richardson International and to Agrium. In the Agrium context, the Glencore is selling what was Viterra's ag sales business, so farm inputs, fertilizer, chemical, and so forth. We represent somewhat in the neighborhood of 350 workers who work on the ag side of Viterra's business. 100 of them, just short of a third, have the title of manager. They work in an ag sales outlet. They work along with the people they supervise. They do not control the capital budget. They do not hire. They do not fire. They do not control the hours of operation. They don't determine prices and so forth. They're just in charge of the joint. By the new definition of an employee under Bill 85, those 100 people who are now unionized and have had a collective agreement for 50 years would become ineligible to be represented by their union.
Would they be ineligible blanket?
In their case, blanket. They'd be out, no longer an employee.
They couldn't seek representation under, as you said, a separate collective agreement?
No. And if they weren't caught by that employee definition, then we'd come along with the supervisory employee definition. Well, all of a sudden, though, if it was determined that, in front of the Labor Relations Board, that, well, okay, even though they're called managers or supervisors, they are still employees, but they can't belong to the same bargaining unit as those they supervise, well, then we'd be bargaining a second collective agreement with the employer, where now there is one, we would have two. Take that example and walk into your local hospital. You can have more fun with that than a monkey with a ball of string. Not that it's fun. Well, thank you. If those are your questions, Tom and Terry and Chuck and Kelly would be happy to answer any specific questions related to their sectors, I'm sure, if you want to interview them past this point. But thank you all for coming.